Hello, and welcome to the conclusion of this special KRAD COVID readings week of reading The Unhappy Ones from the Star Trek 7 Deadly Sins anthology. This is commemorating the release of the Star Trek Adventures Klingon Empire Core Rulebook, which I wrote several chapters of. And in that honor, I am reading in 5 parts this story, which focuses on Kang, Kor, and Koloth, the famous Klingons from the original Star Trek, who later came back on Deep Space Nine. We now will finish the story with the final 2 minutes. Here is Chapter 9, Malvac Bortas. It was when Kor left the mess hall that he and his bodyguard were ambushed. Kor's bodyguard, Nyor, had originally been chosen for his considerable size. However, size and skill were not attributes that necessarily came together, as Kor discovered in short order when 5 masked Klingons were able to take him down. A 6th held a disruptor on Kor. It was, he noticed, a Losmach Soch, long since discontinued by the Defense Force, and the same type that was used on Koloth's first officer. "Do not move," the 6th one said. Like the others, he was masked. Kor simply smiled. "You've got courage, I'll grant you that. Subduing a soldier, holding a weapon on a Defense Force captain. No honor, of course, but one takes what one can get, I suppose. Be silent." Kor then felt a hypospray on his neck, probably applied by one of the other 5. As he lost consciousness, he realized that he now knew at least one of the drugs that had been taken from the dispensary. His dreams were filled with battle, of his defeats turned into victories, of meeting Starfleet's Captain Kirk in armed combat on the streets of Organia, of wiping the sneer off the face of the man at Tygacore, of returning to the Delta Triangle and conquering it, of planting the Klingon flag on the ravaged world of Mestico, and of a hypospray being applied to his neck. That last actually happened, and the dreams of glory and honor and victory faded, to be replaced by the faces of a dozen or so Klingons, all Kuchka, who now at least were showing their faces. They were in a cave that probably serviced one of the dilithium mines. Based on the scarring patterns on the rock and the lack of equipment, Kor supposed that this was a vein that had been tapped out, with the miners having moved on to a new location. "You must be the Malvac Bortas," Kor said. "And you must be Kor, son of Reinar," said one, who had the same voice as the one who had held the disruptor on Kor. Noting that there were no weapons being held on him now, Kor said, "You do realize that nothing is currently stopping me from killing all of you?" "I don't doubt it," said the man, who was apparently the leader. "But we are deep underground in an abandoned mine. The site on this asteroid was discontinued a turn ago. There's no one here but us. The only reason there is still life support is because Supervisor Kobyk does not wish to incur the expense of dismantling it. In any case, Captain, there is nowhere for you to go once you do kill us. Perhaps." Kor had an entire starship at his disposal and 2 more as reinforcements. He was hardly without resources to survive. "I am Nargov. You lead this dishonorable rabble?" Several of the others bristled at that. Nargov said, "Honor is a coin we cannot afford, Captain." "Ridiculous!" Kor said dismissively. "Sneak attacks, sabotage, doing battle without showing your face, these are not the actions of Klingons." "We are not treated as Klingons," Nargov said, "so why should we act like them, when we are looked upon as inferiors?" Kor shook his head. This attitude was hardly unique to these malcontents. Many in his own crew had abandoned Kalis' ways for the very reasons Nargov had given. He recalled an incident on Organia when that bloodworm Kirk had threatened one of his lieutenants with death, and the coward had actually given in, unwilling to die for an empire that considered him less than what he was. On the one hand, Kor could understand how a Kuchka could come to such a state. On the other hand, Kor didn't hesitate to execute the lieutenant when the mission was over. Finally, he spoke. "I now know why you take arms against your commanders. I know about the feud between Krov and Galar that led to Krov's death, and eventually that of Galar and Malvac." He looked at each member of Malvac Bortas in return. "But when faced with an injustice of this kind, you should have acted like Klingons and challenged your superiors." Nargov gave Kor an incredulous look. "Do you truly believe that would be allowed? Oh, we tried to issue challenges, but our attempts were met with howls of laughter by our section chiefs." Nargov moved closer to Kor. "That is why we brought you here, Captain, to tell you the truth after hearing the lies of Kobyk and Sorkav. You have done so, though you have told me little that I did not already know." Kor folded his arms over his sash of office. "What happens next?" Chapter 10. Sorkav. Sorkav was giving Kobyk an inventory of the drugs stolen from the dispensary when two of the KRAD captains, he wasn't sure which two they were, all the weak heads looked alike to him, barged in without even announcing themselves. "How dare you?" Sorkav said. "We are in the middle of..." "Be quiet, Sorkav," Kobyk said. "What do you want, captains?" Sorkav whirled and practically spit on his brother. More and more, since these Patakpu arrived, his brother had been acting strange, and now he was deferring to them, telling him to be quiet. The taller captain with the deep voice said, "Kor is missing." According to his first officer, the shorter one with the oily tone added, he was last seen on his way to interrogate a section chief on Site Wedge. It was typical of the weak heads to get lost in such a manner, but Sorkav said only, "I will have one of my men on that site conduct an investigation that will..." "We have seen the results of your investigations, Sorkav," the tall one said. "Besides," the other one said with an insincere smile, "it isn't necessary. My first officer has already conducted an investigation." Angrily, Sorkav advanced on the captains. "You had no right!" "Actually," the oily one said, "we have every right according to General KRAD. Or do you question his orders as well?" Sorkav's response was interrupted by the sound of the tall one's communicator. "Koloth to Kang." Activating the communicator, the tall one said, "This is Kang. Sir, we have found the captain. He is on the asteroid designated Wejmach-Wa. The records have it as the former location of Site Los." Kobyk sputtered his warn-on. "What is he doing there? That asteroid was tapped out a year ago." "We will arrive at the asteroid in 3 minutes." "Very good, Commander. Beam Kor aboard and bring him directly to Supervisor Kobyk's office. Out." Putting his hands on his hips, Sorkav said, "There is only one reason why anybody would be on Site Los. That must be where Malvak Bortas is hiding." Kobyk slugged down some of his omnipresent warnog. "Captains, it will take an hour for the Kolothos to arrive here from Site Los." Kang nodded. "We will make our reports to General KRAD in the meantime." The shorter one wore that damned smile again, where, among other things, we can report that it never occurred to the mine's chief of security to look at an abandoned mining site when he was trying to find the Malvak Bortas. With that, they left. Whirling on his brother, Sorkav asked, "How much longer must we put up with these fools?" Kobyk stared witheringly at his brother. "Until they are done cleaning up your mess, Sorkav. Now finish your report." Smoldering, Sorkav did so. Then he returned to his cabin. He was obviously going to have a word with Colonel Kamarak. Kobyk was forgetting his filial duties. By the time the Kolothos arrived at Site Wa, Kor had formulated a very simple plan. It was one that he shared with Kang and Koloth over subspace while his ship was en route, and which he put into a hastily written report to General KRAD. He waited for Kang and Koloth to signal him that they were in Kobyk's office, along with the supervisor and his brother, and then Kor ordered his transporter chief to energize, while nodding to the man next to him. A haze of red, and then both he and Norgav materialized in Kobyk's office. Pointing at Norgav, Sorkav asked, "Who is that?" Norgav bared his teeth at Sorkav. "Just another Kushka, Sorkav." "He is here," Kor said, "on behalf of Malvak Bortas." Sorkav laughed. "Excellent! You have brought their ringleader here for me to kill." Koloth stepped forward. "Hardly." Kang did likewise. "It is past time that their side of the story was heard." "They have no side!" Sorkav cried. "They're merely a collection of weak-headed miners who..." "Enough!" Kor unsheathed his diktat. "Sorkav, son of Gorik, I find you to have failed in your duties as chief of security of this mine." With the hand that wasn't holding the weapon, Kor backhanded Sorkav across the face. "Are you insane?" Sorkav added, "You don't have the authority to challenge me." "Oh yes, he very much does," Koloth said. "That authority," Kang added, "comes from General KRAD." Kang then activated his communicator. At that signal, 4 Klingons beamed down from the Votak. Kor noted that Bek Jerva was at the forefront, her disruptor aimed right at Sorkav. "If you do not accept this challenge," Kang continued, "then you'll be shot down like the targ you are." Kor tilted his head and smiled. "Well, will you follow the tenets of Kalis that a warrior who does not face a challenge deserves to die without honor?" Sorkav snarled and walked over to the wall behind him, and took down the mek'leth that hung over the sideboard that contained Kobyk's alcohol stash. I would sooner fight than listen to the words of the Great One come from the mouth of the likes of you. Koloth, with uncharacteristic admiration in his voice, asked, "Is that a domain?" It was Kobyk who answered. "Yes, it was forged for our family by the swordmaster himself." Kor nodded. "A worthy weapon, in the hands of an unworthy opponent." The quarters were close, especially with 8 spectators, though that was mitigated by the use of a short sword and dagger. Sorkav lunged, and Kor skipped backwards. His diktag was strong, but he didn't want to risk the mek'leth striking it unless absolutely necessary. There were less than a dozen known domains still in existence, but all of them were still powerful blades that had lost none of their strength over the past 2 millennia. Reluctantly, Kor gave Sorkav credit. He held the mek'leth properly, kept his strokes short and swift. Many times, Kor had faced opponents who swung their short swords in longer arcs, as if it were a bat'leth. At first, Kor and Sorkav feinted and dodged, taking each other's measure. Kor had hoped that Sorkav was as poor a fighter as he was a security chief, but considering that his previous career was in the Imperial Guard, he knew that was a forlorn hope. Sorkav slashed down with the mek'leth toward Kor's head, forcing Kor to block with the diktag. Kor caught the mek'leth in between the main blade and the secondary blade of his own dagger. To his relief, it didn't break. With that temporary impasse, Kor kicked Sorkav in the chest, which sent him stumbling backward, a look of surprise on his face. "Typical Kushka," Sorkav said. "We fight with blades, not feet." Grinning, Kor said, "Actually, Klingons fight with their minds and their hearts. Weapons are secondary." As Kor had expected, quoting Kalis again angered Sorkav. With a scream, he ran toward Kor, his mek'leth raised. Kor ducked, headbutting Sorkav in his belly, wrapping his arms around Sorkav's waist and standing upright, lifting the security chief into the air. Letting out a mighty roar, Kor then threw Sorkav behind him. Turning around, Kor saw that Sorkav lay dazed on the floor, having dropped the mek'leth. Around him, Kor heard his name being chanted by Kang, Koloth, Jerva, and the rest of Kang's crew. And Kobyk as well. That surprised Kor, but also lent wings to his feet as he leapt to Sorkav and plunged his diktag right in between 2 of the ridges of his crest. Blood spurted magnificently out of the wound as Kor thrust the blade into Sorkav's feeble brain. All those in the room cheered Kor's victory. Yanking out his diktag, which caused more of Sorkav's blood to spurt over the office and onto Kor's uniform, he raised his weapon into the air and let out a cry of victory. Kor then turned to face Kobyk. "You cheered my victory. That speaks well of you." It was Kang who replied. "And your victory cannot be questioned by the House of Camarag." "Indeed," Kobyk raised his warnog to Kor. "To a new security chief, and, with luck, a new day for this mine." "Remember," Kor said, "that if your heart is Klingon, then it matters not whether you look as Kalis did. And if your heart isn't Klingon, then it doesn't matter if you do. Being treated as less than Klingon is no excuse to act less than Klingon." Koloth put a hand on Kor's blood-stained shoulder. "Well said, my friend." "Back to Jerva," Kang called. The woman stepped forward. "Sir!" "You will serve as temporary security chief for this mine until Supervisor Kobyk's replacement will be approved by all 3 of us arrives." Jerva smiled. "It will be my pleasure, sir." To Jerva, Kobyk said, "You will have free reign, Beck. On that you have my word." "I have always made it a point," Kang said, "to trust the word of a Klingon." Kobyk bowed his head. Then Kang moved to stand before Kor, next to Koloth, putting the 3 of them in a circle. "Well done, Kor. Let us return to the Votak. I will have Galark prepare a feast to celebrate your victory." Kor smiled. "I'm sure the meal will be glorious." The end. That is in Star Trek 7 Deadly Sins, which is available from the fine folks at Gallery Books. Check it out there. Check me out online at DeCandido.net. My blog is at DeCandido.wordpress.com. My Patreon is at patreon.com/KRAD. And you can also check out the Day of Honor event from last week. It started off with a panel with the folks from Modiphius talking about the Klingon Empire Core Rulebook. Me, along with Rick Sternbach from Star Trek The Next Generation, one of the illustrators, and fellow writers Tyler Attico and Kelli Fitzpatrick. and also a bunch of people from Modiphius. Jim Johnson, Sam Webb, Chris Birch, and Nathan Dowdle. And there are other really cool stuff. Some of the actors who played Klingons are in some of the other panels, including Mary Chieffo and Kenneth Mitchell from Discovery, and Robert O'Reilly and J.G. Hertzler from Deep Space Nine. And a bunch of other people, too. That doesn't even scratch the surface of all the wonderful people who are on this. There's a link in the description below. So check that out. Thank you very much, and please stay safe.